Thank you so much for joining us on the second day of the summit. My name is Anka Bogdanarusu. I focus on advocacy and policy working on Celo. Celo is an open blockchain platform and a network of organizations that are all working together towards the same mission, to create a better financial system that can bring conditions to prosperity to everyone. Before joining the team, I spent 8 years at the World Bank and the IFC working on financial inclusion. And I left it because I thought the potential of blockchain to really drive social impact and advance some of the topics that I was working on from the public sector side was really fantastic, which is why really it is my honor to be your moderator today for the social impact of blockchain on a global scale. We have an amazing set of speakers coming from both the industry and the public sector implementing a variety of projects. And I think we can all hope for a very rich discussion. A lot of the conversation up to this point, both during the summit and in the weeks and months surrounding the summit, has been about what blockchain is, what it isn't, how do we trade, what are the standards, is it useful for the industry, and so on. But I think the really most important question is, so what? We only care about regulation because of the potential impact that blockchain can have on our lives. And with that, I really wanted to start this conversation with Cecilia, who is joining us from UNICEF, to talk a little bit about the UNICEF Fund, which was launched a little less than 2 years ago, a first for the UN agencies, and ask her to give us a few more details about what the fund does, and also what are the categories of social impact startup that you see coming up for application and the UNICEF invests in. Cecilia?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here and joining this panel of great speakers. I'm the lead for investments we make in these social sector solutions from UNICEF's Innovation Fund. And I really wanted to speak more about what we do here. So I am part of this team of innovators within the United Nations. And I think it's words that don't usually appear together. I think probably everyone in the audience knows what UNICEF is, and they know that UNICEF is a United Nations agency to work on the welfare and development of children in the places that need it the most. But very few people relate UNICEF with blockchain and innovation and technology. So I hope after today, more people will know and how those relate a bit more. UNICEF Innovation, this small team I'm part of within the UN, is a team that explores how emerging technologies can improve the lives of children. And we define these emerging technologies as technologies that are starting to grow, and there is not necessarily a lot of certainty around it, around these explorations, and that's why we put the mission to explore them. However, there's enough evidence to think that there's potential to provide a positive social impact. We define these solutions as solutions that overlap between influencing and providing positive change to more than 1 billion people, we say, and lie in markets that are more than $100 billion. So what we mean by that is solutions that really have the potential to positive impact large numbers of people, but lie in financially sustainable markets, so that we change this humanitarian perspective of being more assistentialist and providing 100% charitable money to charitable organizations, but we work on supporting organizations that have the potential to sustain themselves, have this financial sustainability in mind. So amongst all that umbrella is that we launched the crypto fund, as you said, Anka, 2 years ago. Before that, the earlier version of that was what we call the Innovation Fund, that was launched in 2016. So we launched first the Innovation Fund as the first investment vehicle within the UN to provide capital to these emerging technologies, blockchain being one of the main technologies. And then 2 years ago, we launched this crypto-denominated fund. So the first investment vehicle that holds, accepts, and is able to disperse cryptocurrencies within the UN. So this crypto fund is basically part of the umbrella of this larger innovation fund, but is basically enabling us to challenge really the system and as a team learn how to operate in a digitally financed world, which is not only what was coming, I would say, a year ago, but now what has been strengthened. And it seems like we're moving more and more to that being the only option to be included in the future. So this crypto fund, we've learned a lot. We've done a lot of innovations. To your question, maybe about why this happened. I would summarize by saying that I think we couldn't ignore the reality that we are in a digitally financed world. We did this just before COVID happened. But thanks to that, we were able to have a vehicle during the time of COVID that we could easily make the investments to startups in the field that were struggling in a much more agile way. So aside from that, blockchain is one of the main technologies. We also invest, of course, in data science, AI, drones, Internet of Things, so other types of technologies that also generate a positive impact. But when it comes to blockchain, that is one of the main technologies. It's also a matter of there are some, well, again, there's not a lot of certainty around the technology. I think there's enough evidence to show that there's potential. There's potential in the transparency that it brings to the public sector. How can we track the funding? How can we give this visibility that it's not always related to what you described in the humanitarian sector? The efficiencies related to processes and ways of transferring money. And I think the crypto fund is an example of that, how it was so different for our team to be able to have this vehicle and transfer money through that, and really support solutions that are using the technology for new applications. And last, to your question of what solutions those may be, we've been investing in, for example, explorations of blockchain for tracking medical supplies, tracking vaccines in India. We've invested in a platform that is able to track the donations of funders to small businesses in the field. With this whole global perspective that we have, if you do a transfer from a different country, now you don't need to be present. Overseeing that company to understand what is going on. I think if you are integrated in the digital ecosystem, which of course, by the way, we're leaving a lot of people behind, but that on the side, you have tools that you're able to use. And of course, financial inclusion. In just a few minutes, we're launching a first cohort of blockchain solutions working on this area as well. So with that, I'm gonna stop for now. I know there's a lot to talk about, especially for financial inclusion, and we have speakers that can also speak a lot about that.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. I'm going to use this moment to invite everyone who may be watching to consider donating to the crypto fund. I think it takes Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's a cheaper period now to donate in Bitcoin and Ethereum than earlier in the year. And yeah, keep your eyes on the UNICEF announcement of their new cohort. I think you're going to get a lot of ideas of high potential impact startups from around the world. And thank you for bringing up financial inclusion. Right now, it's one of the most talked about pathways in which blockchain can make a social impact. everywhere in the industry. Just this weekend, the president of Salvador invoked financial inclusion as a reason for making Bitcoin legal tender in the country, which happened late last night. And so I wanted to turn to two of our speakers. First, Richard, who is the founder of CEO of Electroneum, and then Susan, who's head of public policy at Ripple. Both of you work quite a lot in this area of how to bring financial inclusion and products and services for those who, like Cecilia said, are right now left behind by some of the current financial sector. Richard?
Hi there. Thank you very much. Thank you. Much appreciate being here. So, I mean, there were some really interesting things, I think, in that El Salvador bill being passed. I personally was really surprised it passed. I thought the Americans would do everything in their power to stop it passing, and as it happens, the fact that it's passed is an awesome thing for the entire industry. Now, in amongst it, I don't know how much you've read of it, but in amongst it, one of the parts of the regulation that's really important within that bill is that there won't be any capital gains taxes on Bitcoin in El Salvador. So just to put a spotlight on that, if you want to use Bitcoin in the UK or virtually every other developed world and probably most of the developing world, you also would need to be keeping detailed accounts of transactions from a tax perspective, because if the underlying asset goes up or down in value, you've made a gain or a loss, which needs to be calculated. Now, in real terms, that's not a very good technology to be using for making transactions, or rather the technology is exactly perfect for making transactions. It's not a very good regulatory environment for making those transactions in. So it's a breakthrough in two ways for me. One is the very fact that that bill's passed and people can now use Bitcoin to pay their taxes, which is just incredible. But at the same time, removing that capital gains tax is super important. Which also, just quickly while I'm there, brings me on to the next part, which is everybody wants in the crypto world to see the developing world using cryptocurrencies for transactions. Of course, that's literally the reason that I got involved in cryptocurrency, I suppose, in certainly in terms of Electroneum. But everybody needs the speculative side for it to turn back into money as they see it, right? So everybody expects you to cash it to dollars, to cash it to euros, or to cash it to something else. And one of the things that Cecilia said there, which I really loved, is the fact that the UNICEF are taking donations in cryptocurrency, and they are pushing that cryptocurrency out without making a transaction into fiat. And that is, we are the very first small period of time to actually seeing cryptocurrencies used in the way that they were developed to be used, which is they are holding the value. They don't need to be converted into fiat to be worth something to the user. So they can be used as is, passed around the network, and they can have an ecosystem. But the irony of that, and I will be quiet in 2 seconds, I promise, but the irony of that part is, where do they get their underlying value? It's the speculative market. So the speculative market drives the underlying value of the price. So outside of stable coins, we have this weird juxtaposition between the markets that are genuinely using cryptocurrencies in the way they're envisaged, which are building an ecosystem and having this passed around, and their value, their holdings are entirely dictated by a completely different market in another place in the world, where people are speculating on them. So fascinating to be involved in this market. It's still so early, as we've seen from just one country so far passing that bill, but we're going to see others. It's going to be the first domino has just been flipped, I think.
Thank you for that, Richard. I would like to go to Susan, and as you know, we're talking about different types of currency, how it flows through the ecosystem. Ripple has been around for quite a bit. It's one of the companies with sort of longest history of doing this consistently. How are the solutions that Ripple brings to life impacting inclusion around the world?
Thanks so much, Anka, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak today. I think, Ripple has always believed that if we could democratize financial systems the way that the internet democratized information, we can bring billions of people into it. And, building on the bill that was passed in El Salvador, the way that you do that is through accessibility to digital wallets. So giving people the ability to hold crypto, including Bitcoin is one example. And there are thousands of tokens out there currently that we think can be used in ways that Richard outlined in his answer and discussion. We utilize blockchain technology in our software, and we started with banks in order to build the network up. But today, many of our customers are payment service providers and digital wallets that are targeting the and underbanked. eCash, one of our customers, is one of the largest mobile wallet players in Bangladesh. They have 36 million customers using their app, 90% of which were newly banked when they signed up. And that's what we are hoping to do with more of our customers, to bring more of the and underbanked into the system. The way that the current financial infrastructure is built was meant to favor big banks and corporates. We think that blockchain has the ability to really revolutionize that through empowering smaller players to reach out to those populations that have been historically underserved, and to give them access to crypto, to other financial assets that will bring them into the financial system and empower them as they move forward.
Thank you, Susan. I've been a financial inclusion geek for 8 years now. And, at the World Bank, when we used to talk about what are some of the obstacles of financial inclusion, obviously, access, usability, cost were among the ones that featured highly, and that I think that the blockchain industry in general can find solutions to. But one that also popped up that people don't necessarily think as much was access to ID. You can't open accounts without some form of identity. And as we move more and more towards a digital world, digital identity is really such an essential element. And a lot of the people that we're looking to serve through our companies or through the UNICEF lack access to identity. And so it is really my pleasure to invite Noor, who is the managing director and CEO of the Rohingya project, to talk a little bit about how the project came to life, what it's doing, and how it's using really blockchain to empower through decentralized technology, really a decentralized population. Noor?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I am Muhammad Noor. I'm a Rohingya. So before I go into the digital identity and the blockchain and the project that we are heading, I just want to take you one step back and discuss about the real intensity, the plight of Rohingya, why this issue really deserves a solution and need a solution. So Rohingya is an ethnic minority of Burma, living there for centuries, which has been subjected to genocide and ethnic cleansing and so on. And in 1982, Burmese government has revoked the citizenship of Rohingya, which made them stateless on top of that, on top of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and so on. So since then, Rohingya has been stateless for generation now. So when I talk about generation, a lot of people inherit property to their children. Rohingya inherit poverty. Rohingya inherit illiteracy. Rohingya inherit everything that you could imagine. And I'm being a Rohingya, I was born stateless. I know how it feels like to be unwanted and invisible and kicked around like any other Rohingya. So just to give you a few examples, for a Rohingya, a person, whether in Burma or outside Burma, to just go to a hospital or to school is a project by itself. They cannot access any kind of services like any other individual access services or take it for granted by any other country. So the problem happens if the government gives you access to these services, but what happens if government stops you from these services? Government kills your identity, government switch off your identity. So for a Rohingya to go to school, to go to a college, so I always say for a Rohingya to have a birth certificate is a luxury. To have a passport is a super luxury. Forget about traveling from one place to another. So we are talking about some real harsh situation of Rohingya. A lot of people knows about this, but some might not know the situation that Rohingyas are facing in every corner of the world, including those who are in Burma. They are facing genocide and ethnic cleansing and human rights violation. But those who are outside due to identity, they cannot access to livelihood. They cannot open up anything. They cannot go to school. They cannot go to hospitals. All these issues that they constantly face. So, I mean, at this age of in the 21st century, Rohingyas are forget about having this identity. Rohingyas are not able to save any money in any bank account. They are not able to open up a bank account. And the least services that a person can do, from sending money from point A to point B, something like a Western Union, is also not possible for Rohingya. So it's an extreme dire situation, and it's been going on for last 70 years, and there is no solution brought forward, and everyone is just stuck in this refugee box where they need handouts, they need some sort of help on a daily basis. But so how we are addressing this solution is through using technologies such as blockchain, digital identity. So we are trying to build a decentralized institution for the Rohingya to elevate, to uplift Rohingya in diaspora, at least on the beginning, on the first level, using technologies such as, of course, blockchain, and empowering it, building an infrastructure, social and financial inclusion. So I will just give you a few examples how we have been doing. So to empower this social and financial inclusion and building this platform using technology, of course, like a DID, decentralized ID, using blockchain as a key to unlock the services, and bridging between the existing platform that is out there, not creating a parallel system to it as well at the same time, and giving them access to. So we have launched a couple of services. One of them is our coin, a Rohingya coin, where it's like a redeemable token. People, a refugee can earn in different settings, because in different countries, they apply different law, which they are not able to work, or not recognized as refugee, or not allowed to have access to any kind of services. So they can do some sort of work and redeem this token, and then redeem it to earn this token and redeem it with some of our partners, maybe food items or maybe health insurance, find a way to get around the system and give them some sort of livelihood. And at the same time, also we have did our pilot on Art Academy, on a social inclusion part, where Rohingyas in every parts of the world now not allowed to go to school, forget about universities and getting a degree and so on, at least giving them some sort of an online access of education, so that they can at least get somewhere with those. So that's what we are looking at, and we have launched Art Academy, which is like training the teacher of program, which multiplying effect of Rohingya people, where to get more teachers and teach them and so on. So all this is being able to come into realization using some sort of technology. It was not available before. So we are one of the largest victim of centralized institution, such as Burmese government. So that's why we are building this decentralized system, where decentralized institution to uplift and banking the unbanked and giving them solution. And we might not have the solution for every problem, or we don't have the antidote to the entire problem, but we might solve a few problems, which is social and financial inclusion, at least to uplift them, where to bring some sort of dignity within the Rohingya, rather than waiting out for handouts. And we will discuss further. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that, Noor. As we all talk about inclusion, whether it's social inclusion or financial inclusion, in some of these cases, is we're talking about populations that don't necessarily, or groups of population don't necessarily have access to technology the way the few of us on this panel do. And one of the critiques, including as we're talking about recent events, about the recent Salvador bill, is how are you really going to solve financial inclusion and for accessibility when you're talking about the technology that is so poorly understood by even people in finance, other people in technology? How are you actually going to translate that and make it accessible to people that are not digitally literate? They're not necessarily crypto literate, definitely. And so I want to go maybe around the virtual room, starting with Richard, on what is your response to that? How does Electroneum solve for that critique?
Yeah, well, that's how we envisaged Electroneum at the beginning. I was involved in cryptocurrencies when everybody who used cryptocurrency was using Linux at the time. There was very few bits of Windows software around, and it was all command line driven and pretty hideously complicated. And I've got another company that was building mobile apps. So we said, well, it's madness. We need to make the user interface experience simple for cryptocurrencies. And that's going to be the same for not just Electroneum, but for every cryptocurrency that wants to get used. You just need really simple access. And then we just have to rely on that technology uplift that's going on in the market. So whilst you are absolutely right, there are some people that are completely bereft of all technology. The majority of the world are starting to gain access to smartphones. And those smartphones are the key, because if you've got access to some form of data and a smartphone, you should be able to access wallet technology. And wallet technology then gives you access, of course, to cryptos. But the thing is, the biggest thing holding people back is not, in my opinion, is not technology now. The thing holding people back is the regulatory environment, because the regulatory environments are different all over the world. They're hideously out of touch with what's going on. People outlaw cryptos and then they make them illegal again, but in some other way. Everybody has still got this, like I said earlier, this sort of association with having to cash in and out of something. What we did with Electroneum is we partnered with mobile operators, and we enabled people to convert Electroneum directly into airtime and data. So we were trying to make the ecosystem directly out of that, because you can use the data, of course, on your smartphone. But then what we realized then is that actually people need to be able to earn cryptocurrency. It's okay saying, well, you can earn some money and buy some cryptocurrency, but if you don't have any ID or you're unbanked, how are you going to convert your fiat currency into crypto to jump into that world? So we've got another platform called anytask.com, and we're partnering with some other people to enable people to actually earn the ETN or crypto directly, and then change it for other cryptos. That's really critical as well. Is these good projects? Everybody loves ETH, everybody loves Bitcoin, but as was said earlier, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of good projects. Let's say there are hundreds of good projects, and it's nice to be able to jump between those to make use of the utility of those tokens or the fungibility of those other pure cryptocurrencies for transactions. So there's quite a few things, I think, long answer, but quite a few things. Simplicity of design, simplicity of use is absolutely critical, but the regulators have just got to get their heads around the fact that this is the future, embrace it, make it accessible for people that are unbanked. Because certainly the UK is not doing that. The UK has got a no, what's called de minimis on digital transactions, which means I need to do we've now partnered with somebody in another jurisdiction to enable us to still allow people to earn ETN up to a small amount, say $150 or $300, without going through a full KYC process. They do a KYC process, but not the full passport required process. And if you have that system of de minimis and it's managed well, so your anti-money laundering system is managed well, then it works. But if you suddenly say, actually, if you earn 1 cent's worth of Bitcoin, you've got to produce all this documentation, then it blocks that technology from ever being used. So I want to see the regulators embrace this. And lots of people, lots of different governments around the world are making lots of noise about how they're going to help financial inclusion, and financial inclusion is so important to them. And they say that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, they come out with these laws that are very, very penalising of the unbanked. So I think seeing a little bit more lenience in terms of, no, not the word lenient, actually, a bit more understanding from the regulators of where the unbanked really genuinely sit, and then working out a good system of integrating that. Sorry, that was a long answer.
No, I think that's great. We're looking to get into conversation, not into sort of newspaper headlines. I think that the media can cover that. I want to go back to Noor because Richard brought up a couple of points, which is education is fundamental, and also, again, ability to use and understand to some extent the blockchain is important. You are working with a highly vulnerable population. To what extent do they need to understand the technology? To what extent is it just an easy interface makes them get the service without needing to even bother the blockchain is behind it?
Yes. So, I mean, there are many different types or ways that we go about to educate Rohingya, especially in different, those who live in Burma, those who live in Bangladesh, and those who live in different parts of the world. So each of them is like, especially if we talk about the case refugees in Malaysia, who have some sort of accessibility to a smartphone, and we have carried out a survey with UNHCR looking into smartphone penetration within the community. So we have found there's more people have smartphones in Malaysia than the Bangladesh and other countries. So and similarly in Saudi Arabia. So at the same time, we are also heading a couple of other projects. One of them is Rohingya Vision, which is a media wing for the Rohingya people. So through that, we not necessarily tell them the technical aspect of the blockchain and so on, but what blockchain can do, what can it enable, and how can we use this technology to solve some of our immediate problem, which is like financial inclusion and education and so on. So this is where we constantly create videos and create talk shows and do some sort of an online events to teach them constantly and how this has been going on. And from those Rohingya who have like migrated in different parts of the world, like Europe and Australia and America, where they have the infrastructure and exposure and some sort of legal documents. So now they are able to understand how this crypto world works, how this blockchain works, and they also teach their fellow friends and other relatives around in different parts of the world. So now, since we have started in 2017, it was 2017 and 18 was quite a difficult year for us to explain not only to the vulnerable, but also, unfortunately, due to genocide, Rohingyas are made illiterate. So which is extremely difficult also on another level to get to their what they need and how they need it. But it is a difficult journey, definitely. But on top of that, in different countries, there are different regulations that Richard has just mentioned now. Being a refugee, being some of the countries accept refugees, some of the countries does not accept refugee, but accept them as illegal migrant, immigrant. And so there's different issues that we face. But ultimately, the way we move forward is to make things less complicated for these marginalized people and focus on benefits, focus on decentralization, and focus on the sovereignty, self-sovereignty that this project is going to help. And it is for the Rohingya, and most importantly, by the Rohingya themselves. So that's how we are moving forward.
Thank you for that. I can't think of a better segue to going back to Cecilia, who ultimately works for an institution whose mandate is to look after children and their education and their future, to give us her thoughts on this.
Yeah, thanks, Anka. I mean, yeah, it's so incredible to also be part of this panel, but hearing everything that you are commenting on. Nora, I think your story is so powerful, and I think it should be a great reminder of us working in the space or not, of the implications in the field and in the ground for the people. I think, of course, even at UNICEF, you many times work, of course, so distant from this reality that it's good to have these stories present, because I think that will push us to do more. So a lot of us probably have a lot of emotional things that brings us to the space and wants us to act for it. So my own grandmother emigrated from Germany to Argentina in the mid 1900s, after she was declined the nationality just because she was Jewish. And of course, we all know the story and we know what happened. But I still keep her passport with a hole in the middle and the stamp that says invalid. And that was just a decision made by a centralized authority, I must say. And it was, of course, driven by one person and one movement that led to that. So that generated, of course, the immigration of her and her very close family to a new country without any valid documentation that she was German or even a human being. So I think she wasn't lucky enough that there weren't, of course, at that time, explorations like the ones we're seeing before. And we're not seeing the transition of someone like Nora of having that experience and being able to act upon it. So I think it was much more difficult back then. But I think bringing us back to today, it's just so interesting that I hear, of course, a lot of criticism on the blockchain movement, on the blockchain technology, and on a lot of the things that are generated. But at the same time, it's just so important to remind this other sector that is not yet mainstream within blockchain. So it's not about it's not about Bitcoin or even the fluctuations of the currency. It's about the positive connotations that we can get from using this technology for different use cases. So with that, as I mentioned before, we at UNICEF, we also recognize the importance of financial inclusion and the opportunities that provides. Because of course, it goes from the basic of being able to receive money, to send money to your family, as basic as that, and being able to save, which is a luxury, unfortunately, today in the world. So with that, we launched a call for applications within our fund. And literally just now, if you go to our website, as Anka said before, you'll read 7 super incredible projects and solutions that are tackling financial inclusion. And I wanted to highlight 1 or 2 if I have a couple of minutes, but one is Live Global. And what's super interesting about them is that not only they're based in Rwanda, which is not one of the countries where you're hearing a lot about blockchain solutions being worked on, but there are. So they are building a solution in Rwanda in the field, specifically targeting refugees. So a super interesting thing about their solution is acknowledging that not everyone has that ability to have an ID that makes them, let's say, a citizen of a specific country. So understanding of that, they're using biometric data to enable people to have access to a wallet, a digital wallet, to be able to, again, receive, send money, and save. So it's a super interesting project. It is in its early stages, and just like everything we do here, it's about exploring these things. There is definitely potential, and maybe the solution that we see Live Global has at the moment will not continue as is, but it's just that exact thing that we do with the fund, where we help them iterate and test with the field and reach out more refugees and understand what is the problem in the field. And that is why we invest specifically in developing and emerging countries, because of course today we know it's not only about an idea for implementing a project, but it's also about the implementation and how you go about it and how you test with the people and how do they react to that solution. So I think there is definitely an untapped potential in exploring financial inclusion in places where it wasn't possible before, where this wasn't a possibility for many people, whether it is, yes, a situation of lack of documentation or education. We have another solution from Argentina. Their name is Crypto Lab, and they're actually not only providing a savings platform for the population in a country where there's a lot of volatility and inflation really on their local currency. So not only they provide a savings platform, but they also put a huge emphasis on education, because as we were talking about before, it's also not a matter of having access. After enabling this access, it's a matter of really changing a culture when the culture of saving is not there, especially of course in women for women in developing countries where they're usually, they are more excluded than men, just because of cultural norms. This education component is critical to provide these additional opportunities. Richard.
Richard, you're
myself. Cecilia, you just, one of the things you mentioned in there that I thought was really pertinent to today's conversation was that you were saying that there's really high inflation and lots of volatility within the currency of the nation itself. I won't name and shame a nation, but you get the idea. There are plenty of them around the world, whole continents full of them, in fact, whose fiat currency is super volatile and or being inflated away at a high rate of knots. And one of the things I often hear about cryptocurrencies is, yeah, but they're too volatile to really be used in the real world. And those statements are always made by people in the United States or in Europe or in Australia or somewhere where they've been used to a super stable currency. So it's really interesting that you should make that point, that actually there are people living around the world that have never touched cryptocurrency, that live under the fear of massive hyperinflation and constant daily fluctuations in their standard everyday currency. And so cryptocurrency is actually possibly, even though we see these hideous wild swings in Bitcoin and others, actually that may well be more stable than the currencies that they're living under at the moment.
Richard, thank you for that. And maybe I can use this opportunity to bring one of the questions from the audience, which is asking the panel, what means of payment do you think will serve the purpose of bringing banking to, or I guess not banking necessarily as financial inclusion in one form or another to most people? Would it be private stablecoins, CBDCs, cryptocurrencies of another form? I'm going to go ahead and tackle Susan with this first question, and then see what the other panelists think about it.
Thanks, Anka. I think it's very much to be determined. CBDCs, for example, I think even in a most optimistic case are a couple of years away. But I think what all the focus on digital assets represents is that there's a recognition that of the promise, whether it's crypto, stablecoins, CBDCs, that they portend with respect to financial inclusion, bringing more people into the system, giving them the ability to do more things. And that comes down to, I think, the point that Richard made, which I fully agree with, which is we can educate people and we can give them access to smartphones and smart wallets. But if the regulatory environment doesn't actually enable them to utilize those, if they're not permitted to utilize crypto, then we've halted progress before we've even begun. And that is remedied by rationalizing where we are as globally in terms of how we deal with crypto, how we deal with blockchain and the regulatory environments that we create. And to be sure, I think regulators are correct to focus on consumer protection and making sure that their citizens are not being subject to fraud and manipulation in the crypto markets and the like. But that has to be balanced with creating frameworks that allow innovators to grow, products to develop, and for them to be able to reach the populations that they're looking to benefit. And some of the countries that I think are maybe at the start of this and still working through how that framework should look, including India, Africa, those are places where they have the populations are the most in need of financial inclusion or the most in need of solutions to bring them into the system. So I think it stops and starts with the smart regulation and regulation that is rationalized globally so that all the financial systems are interlinked and people can work together.
Thank you, Susan, for that. As we talk about sort of accessibility of financial tools and services, I'm going to pull a shameless plug and mention that among the latest cohort of UNICEF, there is Katani Pay, which is a solution built on the Celo blockchain to really help bridge the ability to transact from smartphones to just basic phones. So I'm really excited to see them on that list. But we talked about the volatility of crypto, and one of the other questions that comes up from the audience is why so much in terms of up and down on the crypto market, and how does it really impact the ability to use crypto for actual use cases for social impact? Richard, I don't know if you wanted to take that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I sort of touched on it earlier when I said that there are these two markets that are, they are completely meshed together and yet completely separate. There are the people that are genuinely using cryptocurrency outside of the market, but the value is based on the market. So I'll use Electroneum, but all of them work pretty much the same. There's a speculative market for Electroneum on the exchanges. You see millions of dollars a day change hands from one speculator to another. And that defines what the price point is for somebody in Brazil who uses Electroneum to top up his mobile phone. And he earns Electroneum by doing some work designing logos, for instance, on any task. So it's a bit weird that those two markets are connected together, but they are at the moment. That's just how it is. We're in an emerging technology. But what is interesting, and we're probably one of the only people that has this insight, I would suggest, is that we see that people are super smart. So these, whilst we call them the unbanked and and developing nations, they're as smart or smarter than you and I, and they are not silly. So they sit there, and when we see our top-up rates of mobile phone data and airtime, when the price of Electroneum is really high, you see vast amounts of top-ups, thousands and thousands of top-ups taking place. And then if conversely the price of ETN is low, top-ups just, they pull right back to a very low number. So these people are super smart with what they're doing. Even though they are unable to speculate directly on an exchange, they are able to speculate with the things that they've got, which is they have something that fluctuates in value and they can buy another service or goods or services with that value. So I think you'll find that people are speculating on both sides of the market, but one is speculating directly to try and get a profit. The other side, people are going to be speculating to obtain, some food from a street vendor, but they're getting more food for their money, for their crypto.
Thank you, Richard. We were talking with some colleagues recently that we instead of developing nations or emerging markets to really reflect more adequately the pace of technological adoption in some of these markets, we're going to start calling them leapfrogging nation, because they really leapfrog from one technology to another. So I would like to use this opportunity to popularize the term. But speaking about fluctuation in the crypto market, quite recently, there's one famous tweet related to climate and energy efficiency that was credited with bringing down the market. And climate is a big part, especially more recently, of the conversation in blockchain. Is it, mining? Is it sustainable? Is it not? How do we make this? How do we make sure that some of the advances in financial technology that we see are not a step backward when it comes to climate protection and sustainability. And I do, again, Susan, I'm going to call on you because I know Ripple has a number of initiatives around climate that I would love for you to talk about.
Oh, appreciated. I think without wading into the specifics of which side is right, I think a common point of agreement is that crypto uses a lot of energy, and the world is paying attention to climate change, and the crypto industry is no different, needs to focus on how to best mitigate its impact, just like any other industry out there. This is one reason why Ripple joined the Crypto Climate Accord alongside CoinShares, Consensus, and the WEF, amongst others. And the initiative seeks to bring together all parts of the ecosystem to reach 100% renewables and eliminate past emissions. They're basically crowdsourcing ideas on how to make crypto, whether or not the focus is on Bitcoin, or a proof of stake token or something else, to make companies more energy efficient and climate focused. Sustainability is also something that Ripple specifically cares about. The digital asset we use, XRP, was specifically designed in part to be energy efficient. And there was a company announced initiative to reach carbon net zero by 2030. But just to go back to the Crypto Climate Accord, I think, from our perspective, the work that has to be done on an industry-wide basis. And it's best done by sharing ideas and working together to figure out how we as an industry can make crypto more sustainable in the long term going forward. And for new people coming into the market, to give them the tools so that from the outset, they have what they need to mitigate their impact and reach sustainable levels.
Can I just say, Susan doesn't big up Ripple enough on her energy levels. Ripple's Byzantine fault-tolerant validator network is way in advance of the technology that you see burning loads of energy. Remember that those huge energy burners, they were the very first iteration of cryptocurrency. The technology still exists and is still running. So they were never envisaged to be running in the scale that they are. And as the technology moves forwards, people will be coming along like Ripple, making these fantastic leaps forward in reduction.
Thank you for that, Richard. I want to call on Cecilia and maybe challenge you a little bit to tell us how how does the UNICEF coordinate the advancement on some of the sustainable development goals with on education, on financial inclusion, all of those, with the climate ones through the blockchain work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. The first thing, as Susan said, it's undeniable that blockchain as is today and as it works today, it demands and needs a lot of energy to operate. However, I think, of course, if you look at history, you can see a lot of different advancements that started off producing a lot more emissions that then were worked upon and improved, for sure. So I think, it first starts with the recognition that it's not working as efficient as we would want it to work. We're definitely not comfortable with the situation of today, of course, and we're trying to advocate to do something about it. So secondly, we from our team, we're working on exploring how can we make blockchain more efficient, essentially. So how can we work on internal explorations that allow us to make the network more efficient, so it doesn't need as much energy as it needs today. I think we haven't. I can't say that today we have concrete outputs of our work so far, but I think a part I haven't spoken a lot before about is we not only work on external innovations and the innovations that we invest in, but we also work on internal prototypes and research that our blockchain team does. And this is one of the topics that are super important to us. How can we make it better? So this is where we are today. It's, you know, doing both things, exploring how the technology can help achieve the sustainable development goals around the areas that you mentioned and that we were working on, but also how can we improve the technology and the technology application per se, so that it doesn't damage the environment as badly as it does today.
Thank you, Cecilia. I will go ahead and argue the one way of helping along that mitigation would be to add in the crypto fund tokens such as XRP or Celo, which is, you know, carbon negative, or Electroneum, who are working on this goals, and it will help offset a little bit of the energetic impact that the tokens that are now in the, or the currency that are now in the fund have.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So we are accepting today Bitcoin and Ethereum, mostly because at the time of the creation of the fund, these were the two currencies that truthfully they were the most popular and generally adopted and understood. And that's the reason we started with those, but it's definitely not an ending point. Like, we've been working for the past year really on exactly that, which other currencies, including like stable coins, like which other currencies would make the most sense for us to adopt, so that we can also expand access as well. So there's that. And also we're working also together with the Ethereum Foundation, for whom it's a major concern, also the climate footprint on this matter as well.
That's a great call to action, I guess, to anyone who's watching, to again figure out how to make your project more carbon neutral, or at least offset some of the electricity usage, and then ping UNICEF for, you know, help donate to the fund and support the creation of great startups around the world. We are drawing towards the close of our session, and one of the things that I wanted to touch on is asking all of you to give me quickly, what is the biggest blocker that you see right now in terms of as an obstacle for blockchain to have the social impact that it could have? Richard?
I'm terribly sorry. I was answering a person's question who was talking about that we're still on the panel questions. So he was talking about Electroneum, and he says, what's the carbon footprint for Electroneum? So I'm just going to throw in a very quick answer to him, which is to say that Electroneum's carbon footprint is very low. We only have a handful of validators, and they are, well, there's a dozen validators at the moment, and we use NGOs as our validators. And as such, the electricity carbon footprint is very, very low indeed. Sorry, I do apologize. What was the question again? And I will answer you. I'm so sorry.
One blocker to greater social impact for blockchain.
Yeah, well, that would have to be my favorite, which we've covered before, which is the regulatory environment. And I will just throw in, I know we're very short time, stable coins. Everyone talks about stable coins. Stable to what? You always have to ask that. Stable to what? Because people don't. And so they need to just get that in their head and let that rattle around for a little while as well.
Noor?
From anyone else or from me?
Yes. So just, of course, one of the things that we have to always address is during this digital transformation, which people don't talk about, is the mindset change, where all these regulatory places based on what exactly. So now in the cases of Rohingya and other stateless, we always, that's where I come from, the background is. So the perspective is also now we can see a lot of trend that also excluding the marginalized people, also excluding the stateless people. So the mindset need to be changed on this, on this moving forward with this digital world. And most importantly, just important point beside the regulatory point is that now today there's over 80 million refugees across the world now. So this is not the product of institution. This is a product of government or centralized institution that already today exist. So, and then we are also asking solution from them. So we need to find an alternative solution where in the case of Rohingya and other refugees, when any kind of donation comes in, it does not go directly to them. So blockchain can actually empower and replace all this intermediary then that directly goes to the person that needed this. So blockchain can enable a lot of things. So that's my second. The third, in terms of environment, we also have to see different countries like India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and part of Africa, where centralized institution also controlling electricity, internet, and many other things. So there's a lot of initiative on the blockchain that can be incentivized using your own power and solar, and can be redistributed and so on. So these are also factors that need to be understood and taken care. And we are also looking this exciting projects actually will empower a lot of people when it comes to decentralized internet and decentralized electricity and so on, empowering with blockchain.
Thank you for that. Susan, one blocker for greater social impact.
I agree with Richard. It's the regulatory environment. Speaking as a policy person, I think it has to, it's one, the development of frameworks globally, and two, making sure that that those frameworks are not developed in silos, so that people aren't just able to use blockchain or crypto within borders, but that it truly becomes something that we can use globally across borders, and again, create a interwoven financial system that works for everyone.
Thank you, Susan. Cecilia?
Yeah, I honestly agree with everything being said, but just for the purpose of adding another important factor, I would say evidence of impact. As we were talking about a lot during the panel, a lot of these things are still explorations. This is still an exploratory technology, and a lot of it is not finalized. It's just the beginning. What we need is more solutions that are able to share concrete outputs and results that would trigger more uses, more adoption. And the last thing I would comment on is, after working with multiple blockchain solutions that are working in the field, the users, the final beneficiaries and the final users don't really care if there's blockchain or not in the solution. They just care about what the solution is and if it works better than the alternative. So in the case of refugees, or in the case of financial inclusion that we're talking about, they really care, is this solution going to be able to enable me to be part of that system? So I think making the solutions more user-friendly and really focus on the user and that it adds value, it's of key importance.
Thank you, Cecilia. I think there's definitely a call to action to all the regulators who may be part of the conference, watching the session live, but also recorded, that every time the social impact of blockchain comes up, to sort of hold a mirror and ask themselves if they've done everything in their power to promote enabling regulation, both for innovation, but for real impact before they ask to see proof of impact. We are getting very close to wrap up the session, and I want to thank you very, very much to all of you for a great discussion. I think it does go back to there are many potential areas in which blockchain can impact and improve our lives. It's really important to be mindful of the design of the solutions, both in terms of making sure that it doesn't damage the climate, for example, in one area, where it helps in others, and that we are as inclusive as possible with our design, so that everybody can actually utilize it, not keep it in a bit of a technical bubble. Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, as a challenge a little bit to all of our viewers and those who may be thinking about how they can bring more social impact in the industry of blockchain. What is one area of social impact where you want to see more being done with blockchain, and why? And I will ask everyone to maybe stay within a minute at most with their answer. And because we ended with Cecilia, I'm gonna go back and start with Cecilia. You are on mute. Maybe while Cecilia is able to unmute herself, I'll go to Richard.
Now I have to unmute. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, crikey, there's vast areas of blockchain in general. I mean, my specialty is really cryptocurrency rather than the other wonderful blockchain projects that are out there. So sticking within cryptocurrency, I think there are lots of vertical markets that are within the realms of possibility of someone taking massive advantage of for their own greed. So if you imagine the US AI industry is powered by loads and loads of humans annotating data. So Tesla is a classic example. They've annotated loads of data, loads of car companies do. All that annotation could be taking place in the developing world without any problems. At the moment, they're paying $12 an hour. Somebody would be super happy to be earning $4 or $5 an hour. If you pay them with crypto, suddenly that becomes accessible. So let's see some vertical markets spread out around the world.
Thank you. Noor? Can you unmute? Or I guess not. I guess we've kept all of the technical difficulties towards the end of the session. Susan, one area of social impact where you'd want to see blockchain make more of a difference?
I will focus it on Ripple's core product, which is to better enable cross-border payments. And Cecilia touched on this, but the ability to send money more easily and smaller amounts than you're currently able to, and have less of that eaten up in fees. If the 7% of funds that are currently eaten up in fees actually made it to the people who it's supposed to go to, and they are able to use that to buy food and medicine and whatever it is that they are using the money for, what a difference that could make. And I think, again, enabling the environment to allow that technology to flourish and be implemented is at the heart of what we do and what we care about and what we think can really make a social impact.
Thank you, Susan. Noor, can you unmute? Is that working?
Yes.
Great. One quick area as we're running out of time.
Yes. So, of course, Richard and Susan have talked about the currency. I will talk about DID, decentralized digital identity, which is a very important aspect for stateless and refugees. So where a lot of blockchain technologies and companies now emerging towards that space, especially on the self-sovereign identity. That's where we are working on, and that's what we would like to see evolve. And along with, of course, stable coin and currencies where people will be able to get their share directly into their wallet without intermediary.
Thank you, Noor. Back to Cecilia to see if the unmuting works.
Here I am. Yeah, again, very interesting points. Just to highlight something different, I think the traceability of the funds from the public sector, it's just so important. And I think it's a benefit that has never been seen before, especially in the developing world, where there's a lot of question about how public funding is being utilized or not. I think having this enhancement and maybe in a future having this ingrained in how public sector, social sector funding is or moves, I think it's just an amazing thing to look forward to.
Thank you so much for that. With that, again, I want to thank you so much for joining us for the panel. I think we've had a really, really rich conversation. I'm hoping our audience thinks the same. If not, please email me directly with complaints. That's fine. And with that, again, thank you. Please stay on the line. We have a really fantastic fireside chat with CZ coming up now. Thank you and have a fantastic rest of your day. Goodbye.